We opened up late that night. We couldn't
It's
just
not the water, right?
for probably about 6 weeks non-stop. People dropped in.
We had just finished. We basically lost everything.
The BluePrint project is all about exploring how we can use creativity with flood-affected communities to capture their lived experiences and to facilitate a co-creation approach to understand how we can engage with those communities to enable them to develop their own way of communicating that risk.
In 2017, my whole ground floor of the house was completely submerged.
I live in Eglinton and my house was completely destroyed.
We have noticed the erosion of the river bank and all, the pathway that we would have walked on as children is now gone.
Myself, my husband and 4 children, we had to move out of our house for 9 months.
The local community came together, really, a huge amount.
Just 10 years of saying the same thing and fighting, using the same words and the same language. I'd love to talk about it in a different way, in a more positive way.
A key idea for this project has been to include sound walks, and there's many different ways you can do a sound walk.
This is the Castle River. It's a double arch bridge. In 2017, one of the arch this side just below where you're standing, was 3/4 full of debris that had just gathered up over decades.
Do you decide on your story and then go and look for your sounds, or do you go out and record your sounds and then decide what story you've got?
So when it comes in here, what happens?
Well, 2017, the water was above the windowsills.
So this as a sound would have been something that would have been heard in the days after the flood then.
When all the branches and all the rubble that came with the flooding all got trapped underneath the arches of the bridge, there's just this thunderous sound of the water.
What struck me was the beauty of the area and that nature will dominate the environment.
Well, it was a really lovely opportunity to find out about somewhere else that's as beautiful as this, that I didn't know was so lovely, but also a place that had been through something similar to us. And again, we were very unaware of what had happened here. We were too wrapped up in our own problems.
For me, the sounds is the new narrative because I would never have thought of sound in this way before. But when you heard the power of the tractor and the power of the river, those sounds are actually more powerful than any visual thing that I've ever known.
Upstream is a beautiful, it's wide, it's unchanged, untouched. Whereas once you start looking downstream, where there has been development, you can see the channel is narrow. If these developments go ahead, it really restricts the options of where we can,
actually mitigate
do stuff. This river was out onto the roads where we parked on the 2017 flood, and my whole house, the ground floor, was completely underwater.
This bar here was at one time a really, really famous place where fishermen came from all over the UK. At one time, the story goes that the chip shops in Newtownstewart were serving salmon.
It's part of my responsibility is that they do feel listened to, and so I think they've done that for each other. I think it's making them much more aware that as a group they have an awful lot to offer. This was our first time of really doing some creative work with the Newtownstewart community, and we've been using the local choir from Glennock Chapel, and they've just turned out to be absolutely amazing. The words that they were singing were words taken from interviews done with local people who'd experienced the horrible consequences of having your house flooded out.
It showed the respect that we have for each other as individuals in the choir, to be honest, because we all just sort of blended so nicely.
Today it is really starting to make sense how the music and all the individual voices and how it's all starting to come together into this wonderful project.
We want to create a sound art piece at the end of this project that will then be able to be used to communicate risk within their own communities, but also up to higher levels, so up to policy levels and up to different government stakeholders, that can really elevate and amplify the voices of these communities who have been affected by flooding.
It started with raindrops dancing happily in the yard.
Its deep, dark centre swirling me out into more intense but brighter colours.
The raindrops fell and fell and fell.
I felt the clouds gathering before I saw them.
Floating in space on a tether to what?
The sun rose red with no warning given.
The sky goes dark before I saw it.
It is an absolute pleasure for me to be here today to launch this wonderful BluePrint project, a bold and creative initiative funded by Creative Ireland that is bringing to light the voices of communities that have faced the harsh realities of climate change.
It's been a really nice celebration today. So we had the choir performance and we had the poetry performance and we had the first look at the sound installation. I think it was March that we had our first meeting here in the Playhouse, and we had some sceptical community members thinking, what is this whole creative art stuff? So it's really exciting, and it's so nice to see the participants come and them to bring their friends, bring their families, and that feels really special.
When we tell the story of our lived experience through art, for the person telling their story, it can be a little bit of a cushion. It can give them a bit of a remove. It can give them a different way, in a different language, in a different medium of expressing something that sometimes can be really difficult and really hard.
Carried by a powerful energy from an unknown force to where? I was able to articulate it without the same aggression, without the same trauma, and knew that is bound to have some impact. And it was, it was a powerful experience on the whole.
Whenever we met Sally, she told us to trust the process, and we enjoyed a process and following a process that we didn't really understand, and then we became part of the process and we loved it. And it's chilling to listen to those poems and to listen to that song, and you get a real sense that is much more effective than going into an office and trying to talk to somebody and try and explain to them.
Cool and the dark. The drops becoming sheets of grey.
Sitting there listening, and it's coming at you from all sides.
It's just sound coming from every different angle, and it nearly gets scary. It's so just amazing the way it works.
It makes you have to kind of sit there and go, actually, how long this is real people's voices and real lived experiences.
You couldn't help but be moved by something like the BluePrint project and by the community voice. What this will do is help tell their story in a way that really touches people. It's very emotive, it's very powerful, so I do think it will have an impact.
The council and the government, that the departments are listening, but they're not necessarily doing anything about it. So they need to take on board what people are actually saying.
Goldilocks and the three bears, 12 foot high, river reassuring and calm.
We have to help ourselves. I was in the big flood and I was in the flooding after it. Where was the councillors and the water people then when we're bailing water out? What did they do and what are they doing in them offices? Why are they not doing something about this?
It was very, very powerful, the message that they gave, and they weren't going to dilute it for anybody. They needed to get this out there because it is an issue that's going, it is our problem already, and whether people don't recognise it or not, they're going to have to recognise it at some point because it is the biggest long-term issue that we have.
What we want to do is to try and simplify this whole process that's happened through the project into a toolkit that's in a very easy to understand way for others to try and take this up, to try and encourage other councils or other artists to implement such a process.
I think taking part in this is really like the big learning would be that the communities, I guess, could relate to each other, that they've both been impacted through flooding. What comes across really strongly from the performances is that the locals are the experts.
It will happen again. Water can't take much more. It will happen again.
If the message was we can be flooded, but we can work together as a community, but we need policymakers to listen to us, that message, I think it's definitely being broadcast. Whether it gets heard in the way that it needs to be heard, the mayor speaking to her, it would suggest it is being heard. Did the project make communities more aware of climate change? I think yes, it did that as well, because not everyone that's been in the project has had their house underwater, but they're all certainly very aware now that houses do go underwater. So I think yes, it did get the message across.
Put it to me in the kitchen.